Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Oh, Dave, what the hell, man?
Oh my God, dude.
What's going on, brother?
Oh,
How
man.
are you?
Doing really well, man. Just trying to, take it day to day. It's been kind of a crazy couple of months, but yeah, I'm excited for the projection going into 2023 and a lot of headwinds, but a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah. So, I saw the post on Facebook,
Sure.
and I saw the blip of like, hey, let's meet at 11th Street Station at 1 o'clock, 1:30, something like that. And I was like, what is he doing? In my head, I've known you for so many years, like in the restaurant industry and kind of the, leading that sort of realm, right?
Sure.
And I'm like, maybe he's gonna just branch out on his own, and like he's like, I'm doing it, I'm going this route. And then I couldn't come into town, so I was like just kind of monitoring. And then all of a sudden, it's like, boom, boom, boom. I'm putting my name in the hat.
Sure.
I'm running for this. So, yeah, man, I want to get into it because I reached out. I was like, dude, you got to come on the podcast.
Sure.
Like, we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what the hell?
I mean, I feel like, people have asked me, have you ever been in the political arena before? And I would say yes and no. I would say no in that I've never been in an elected position. I've always had an appointed position. Two very different dynamics when you're appointed versus whenever you're actually elected. And so by virtue of what happened over the pandemic and kind of preface all of that, I am the president of the Restaurant Association in Durango, CRA Durango chapter president for the past almost 8 years. So you kind of have to insert yourself into that political arena, whether you want to or not. We're a 501c6, so you are advocating and educating on behalf of a membership-driven organization. So again, when you're trying to influence policy, you're doing so, again, in an advocacy and educational level. And so to kind of answer your question, why am I here? What am I doing? What the hell? So I've kind of been able to leverage a lot of those, I wouldn't say relationships, but leverage a lot of those lessons learned over the past 8 years. And then in the pandemic, I kind of assumed the role of helping out all restaurants that I could to weather the pandemic. I mean, as we all know, everything was shut down. Restaurants were inclusive of that. And so there's a whole backstory to that. But when we were shut down, March 17th of 2020, what was the road out, So because of all of those things that happened over the course of the years, the governor's advisory panel called me and like, hey, we need to figure out how we can reopen restaurants, but do so in a safely manner to make sure that you guys can maintain, some sense of profitability, but also be able to do so in a healthful way and not contribute to, COVID-19 being spread. Anyways, so I was on the 12-person advisory panel for the governor's side on that first closure, trying to advise his policy team on how to reopen restaurants. Obviously, we reopened. All those different dynamics were at play, between social distancing and percentage capacity restrictions, that sort of thing. And then it turned into like we shut down again, and so there's so much not known and so much conjecture that I really just wanted to make sure that people knew whatever information came from the federal side, state side, or regional or local side. I wanted to be the megaphone for that information. I'm very passionate about restaurants and hospitality, and I feel like we lose such a dynamic piece of our community if we have a bunch of restaurants that fall out of business. You think of Durango, you think of all the great things outdoor wise, but you also think of great food, great drinks, and a community. To me, like the restaurant community is the fabric of that community. I mean, the tapestry that is woven through restaurants. I mean, there's few things similar. I mean, we have more restaurants per capita than San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So that's a feather in the cap for us. And I wanted to maintain that. So anyways, it's a really long way to answer your question. It's all
good.
But anyways, and so I really wanted to, be an advocate for restaurants, be able to give them all the right current information. As we know, the information changed almost by the hour. So really just trying to make sure that everybody had the right information. So whatever decision that they made, it was based upon accurate information for their business, information for their families, information for their employees, whatever decision that they made, good, bad, or indifferent, they had it based upon accurate, timely information. Anyways, so I learned a lot and really figured out what it was like to be in the private arena, advocating in the public arena, and educating our electeds about what it takes to run a business. I know what it takes to operate a business in Durango. I know what the workforce challenges are in Durango. I think that was really important to have perspective on, especially if you're going to be an elected official. And so that's kind of what I'm kind of basing everything on, is that, man, I came from nothing in Durango. I mean, I moved here 18 years ago, and literally I had no job. I came in with all the crap in my Ford Taurus. I mean, that was my car when I moved to Durango. And I didn't have a job. I mean, my first job in Durango was cooking pizzas and slinging beers at the old schoolhouse. And then cooking dino nuggets at the Bears Den for all the ski school kids during the day. So my first jobs in Durango were in hospitality. So hospitality for me and restaurants are, the reason that I have my life here in Durango. And so, I'm excited to hopefully be, just a message. Well, I don't know how to say this, but basically just be a megaphone for the people, trying to share what our vision is for Durango.
Yeah. So when you're sitting on this advisory board for the governor's office, trying to plan how can we safely reopen, and sort of seeing, opening up that Pulp Fiction suitcase and seeing what's really in the yellow, right? Or getting to see behind closed doors. Did that sort of spark a fire in you to want to be, to put your name and your candidacy out there to run for city council? Or had it always kind of been there as like, because I don't mind being in the public, so to speak. And this is just me personally, but having the capacity, I think, mentally to run as an elected official and potentially be voted in by the community has another whole set of weight that it bears.
For sure.
So that takes a certain mentality, takes a certain very, very community driven, almost, at certain levels, selfless, maybe at larger levels, not so selfless. That could be arguable, but it definitely takes a certain mentality, and it's not for everybody. So, no. I mean, was it always there, or this, like seeing behind closed doors, did it kind of, light a fire to say, man, I could do good with this, or what drove you to that?
So I would always say that, service has always been kind of hospitality has always been kind of how I identify. To me, when you're an elected official, you're doing it to your point, thankless, selfless to some degree. And for some people it's self-serving, but for me, this is another way for me to give back to a community that's given so much to me. I mean, literally everything that I have has been because of my investment in this community and its investment into me. And so I guess for me, like that's kind of a part of who I am, of like service and doing things for others. And so that's like the genesis. That's the true start of it. But then the second part of that is like, holy smoke, I have the ability to move the needle in the private arena to help, tell these folks, hey, this is why that's not realistic to implement this restriction on restaurants, because this is why when we operate that might as well just shut us down completely, So having some sort of give and take, and then being able to find compromise, but not at the sake of public health. You know what I mean? So where could we align and meet in the middle? And I think we also know in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't fucking know anything.
God,
we were like, I think the particles are settling on the surfaces, so don't breathe in the particles or don't touch it to your face. We know that now is not necessarily of how COVID-19 was transmitted or is transmitted. But what we didn't know, we didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, so we were trying to, throwing darts at a dartboard, trying to figure out what could we do to keep everybody healthy, keep hospitals out of capacity. So there's a lot of, to my original point, like giving out accurate information, but we didn't even know what was accurate because the studies weren't there.
Sure.
So anyways, so I guess, for what kind of propelled this was that, I was talking with really influential people throughout the entirety of the pandemic. Working with our state senator, our state congressperson, working with our federal congressperson and our governor, and talking with them about, having conversations over the phone or in Zoom about what are we doing and how are we doing it. And so it really kind of, got me to think that, man, there's something here that where we can really help out the public and help out the community at large through policy and through strategy. And so I was like, holy smoke, these guys have the potential to affect so many people negatively or positively, I guess, however you want to look at it. And I thought that was a really cool thing to like, how much better could it be to make a community than to invest time and energy into policy and strategy and trying to figure out what do we want? How do we, what's the roadmap?
Yeah.
And so, I feel like there's a really cool opportunity for me to, do what our vision of Durango is, and really excited to hopefully, get into office and affect that.
Yeah. So if you were to be elected, does this have an impact on your current position with El Moro? Or so I don't know how much time it takes to be a member of city council. I'm not sure if it is 9 to 5 or what does that look like?
So full disclosure, I was done at El Moro December 1st.
Okay.
So
wow.
I'm no longer at El Moro.
You heard it first here. Probably not. But
17 years I was with Peak Food and Beverage. So 7-8 years over at Steamworks, and then 10 years running El Moro.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah. So
because of this, you're jumping in both feet.
No,
or it's just
no.
time?
I think there's a lot of backstory to that, and I'm not gonna get into it here, but there was a time where I think we both came to an agreement where we've been doing this for a long time. I think there's a great opportunity for somebody else to take over El Moro and to really take this to the next level. When you've been doing something for 10 years, you kind of get restricted, about taking it to that next level. And so anyways, so Mandy Davis, I don't know if you know Mandy, but she's amazing. She did the Durango wine experience. She coordinated that for a number of years. She did the Taste of Durango. She ran the Ore House. She is more than capable of stepping into that role and then again taking that to the next level. So really excited for what she's gonna do for El Moro. And then I wanted to run for city council, and because of how Peak Food and Beverage is organized, there's multiple investors that kind of have financial investment into that.
Sure.
And as from a business standpoint, if you're going to take any sort of policy or political ideology decision, it reflects on everybody.
Sure.
So even though city council is nonpartisan, if I ran for city council and made some decision that could potentially harmfully impact the restaurant, then it wasn't something that was going to reflect well across the board.
Gotcha.
All the investors. So I think it was, to me, like it was an amicable separation. They were ready to kind of see what the next progression of El Moro could be, and I kind of was ready to take on other roles in my life. And so city council is one of those. And so, I took all of December off, was able to be stay-at-home dad, hang out with the kiddos. Because of work, and the business and especially in Durango, all the restaurants everything's full during the holidays. And so you can't take one day off, much less 7 or 8,
How did it feel to have an actual Christmas break?
It was amazing. I mean, I got to go take my kids. My kids have never hung out with my family, my parents during the holidays. So we got to go back to Kansas and Missouri to go visit my mom and stepdad, my dad and stepmom. So yeah, we got to go do all that. And I mean, it was during that massive Arctic blast in Wichita. Have you ever been to Wichita, Kansas?
Maybe driven through there, but I've never spent any time.
Well, it's a great place to be from, I'll tell you that.
Sorry, Wichita.
No, I love Wichita. My little brother lives there. He has his own, physician practice. His wife, Sarah, she's a physical therapist for the school district. Anyways, so my dad's there, but it was like the high one day was 2 degrees.
Oh, wow.
With the humidity. I mean, just
brutal,
miserable cold. I mean, you're literally doing nothing but staying inside and hanging out and playing board games and putting puzzles together and hanging out with the family. So not a bad thing, but we couldn't get outside to, hang out and have fun outside. But
at least you guys got to spend that time. I mean, we were just talking about that before show. It's, I don't know if it's just the older you get or how you feel about it, but it's like, it's really starting to like almost like be this constant tap that makes you very aware that time is 100% fleeting.
Sure.
And, like you got 2 small kids and it goes so fast. And so to be able to spend some of those times, it's like, I just talked about it on a solo episode I recorded, but it's like, I struggle with kind of constantly being a workaholic, and it's like, if I usually can get about 3 days. I get 3 days off. I'm hanging with the kids, and I start to freak out. Like the phone's not ringing, And then like day 4 and 5, you're panic mode, and then it's like by the 7th day, you're like, well, it just is what it is, But yeah, man, it's kind of amazing to get to experience those times because there's only they're not infinite.
Sure.
There's only a couple times, and so that's kind of neat that this was the first time in a long time that you were like, oh my God, I actually have a real holiday season with my family.
Yeah. and I don't think I would ever get that time again to be able to take the time off and be stay-at-home dad and be engaged. And we talked about engagement before this, and like everything is about buying in and engaging and being a part of the process. And so, I knew I would never get this opportunity again. So I really wanted to take full advantage of being able to take the kids skiing and go hanging out and doing whatever, picking them up from school.
Yeah. So the impact from a city council stance, what you did, and I kind of purposely, I'll get little snippets of information before these shows because I don't want it to really alter the way I'm talking to you. Like I don't want to regurgitate or paraphrase some editor at Durango Herald and be like, I asked you the same exact question, Dave, but act like it's the first time. I don't want to do that. So I kind of see like bullet points and stuff, but from what I was seeing, it seemed like you had such a huge impact during that COVID, first, second shutdown, and kind of getting that fabric back to work because, looking at, I sit on a committee with Bayfield right now, and we're looking at workforce housing, and it's kind of weird. And at first, like we start talking about workforce housing, and it is very much like driven towards our EMTs, our medical professions, our sheriffs, departments, teachers, things like that. And you think about that. Well, then we started looking at AMI the other day, right? Mm-hmm. So just a medium income, right? And so then you start to look at like La Plata County, greater area, Bayfield City, Durango in the city, and you kind of have to take a step back and go, well, yes, these people that are our medical, professions and are our, life safety professions and our teachers and things, they are absolutely workforce. But what about the restaurant industry and the service industry? Sure. Because, for the people that don't know, like Durango is, I would say, I think it is the closest ski resort in Colorado to a lot of surrounding areas. Like obviously Arizona, New Mexico, there's Angel Fire, but it doesn't get nearly as much snow, and Texas. And so we have a lot of tourism. Like that is our industry. I've got clients that come up from Mississippi and Alabama and go, what's the industry here? Like you guys don't manufacture anything. Like it's tourism. Sure. It's and that's pretty much our largest. And so we sort of took a step back the other day and like, well, yes, like AMI does affect the teachers and the nurses and things like that, but it also affects the people in our service industry. And that's a huge, weave in the fabric of our community. And it's not only just Durango in town. It's not Durango, North Mountain. It's Bayfield, La Plata County, Montezuma, even Aztec, Farmington. Because as it gets more expensive to live here, like people are kind of having to sprawl, but they want to come here to work and live and breathe.
Sure.
And so that impact that you made to kind of get through COVID as safely as you could and get not only your restaurant, El Moro or, Steamworks for that or whatever you guys, I forget what you had at that moment, but all the restaurants. You were advocating for all of the restaurants, all the service workers.
Sure.
And I think the impact was definitely felt. It may not have like been told back to you of like, hey, thank you so much, Dave. Like, I can't believe you did what you did. Like, it's almost like a silent echo. Like
Sure.
you were getting this thing done, and all of a sudden people go back to work and they're like, oh, thank God, if they wanted to go back to work
Sure.
at that time. But that was such a massive impact. Like I said, I don't know if you felt it personally, but do you think within a city council realm that you can have that same type of impact? Now that might be a little bit scaled because obviously we don't, every other year we don't have a COVID-19 that shuts us down to kind of have such a grandiose like return back to work sort of an impact. But
Sure.
From a city council level, do you think that there can be an impact to our community, not only just Durango, but also because it has a sprawling effect.
There's a ripple effect, right? And the primary thing that I'm trying to do as we get into the campaign here is, again, I kind of get back to like, I know what it takes to operate a business. I know what the workforce challenges are, but I have not been in every single person's shoes in our community. So right now, one of my primary goals is to talk to different stakeholders and not just EDs, not just executive directors, but people that live and work and thrive in our community. Trying to perspective is what I'm really trying to garner as I get into council. Really talking to people that have been impacted by different things within our community, whether it's houseless or food insecurity or developing the phase 203 Springs, or what does it look like for the La Posta development? What does it look like for policing strategy for Durango in the next coming years? So I'm trying to meet with all these different stakeholders to figure out what their vested interest is and why it's important to them, and really figure out, well, that's my vision. Your vision is my vision, collectively ours.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And so that's one thing that I'm really trying to do is to just find true perspective for as many as I can. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to get everybody, but what is the immigrant population? What's their interest and what are their challenges in our community? How do I garner their perspective? The Native American population, how do I find better perspective from what their challenges and opportunities are? You name it. Like I want to, talk into trails, Durango trails, what is Mary's opportunities for Durango in the next 10 years? One thing that I feel like sometimes we get too kind of restricted by is that we only hang out with our own like personal community. Mm-hmm. And that is our perspective. Yeah. As an elected official, I'm not just representing the people that I hang out with. I'm representing the Durango people within the Durango city limits, so who are the people that are in the Durango city limits
and beyond,
beyond. Sure.
It's, that's, I've had a lot of, we had Matt Salka with the county on, and
sure.
There's always a divide in it, and it's like I don't know how we get past it, but it's like, yes, the responsibility. Same thing with the town of Bayfield. Like this committee I sit on is for the town of Bayfield, right? But those red lines, it's not like the Great Wall of China.
Sure,
like people come from Forest Lakes, so people that, like you say, the Southern Ute population, they're driving to Walmart, they're driving to Home Depot, they're driving to restaurants, so it is the epicenter of the greater community. It's like it's the largest demographic, but it's like, yes, your responsibility is within those red lines on the map.
Right.
but it has a bigger impact. And that's
Sure.
the thing is like, I don't know how we get past that divide because it's like, you can only do so much, you know,
Sure.
it's like, yes, your responsibilities if elected would be within those red lines. It's like, how do we do this? But I think the thought process is like, well, it isn't, yes, I can only, you know, dictate or, you know, create policy that affects here, but those policies affect in such a greater scale. And that's the thing, that, you know, having just sitting on this small little deal here in Bayfield, it's like, yeah, we really only have the ability to kind of control within those lines. But what we do has a huge impact because in town there's only 350 people or whatever it is. It's tiny. And I think it's closer to 1,000. But
Okay, it's like 350.
Where there's a blip on a map. Sorry. My brain's moving too fast, Dave. Sorry. But, you know, we don't have the population.
Sure.
But in the like Bayfield zip code 81122, there's almost 9,000 people.
Right.
So you've got, you know, maybe 3,000 in town, but those other people, they're coming here, they're coming to the restaurants. And so and then we also all go to Durango, you know? And so most of us, I think Bayfield is obviously a commuter town to Durango. It's
It's a feeder.
Yeah. It's totally 60% of our population drives into Durango every day for work. And
I heard an interesting statistic as I'm kind of having these stakeholder conversations is that the city of Durango doubles every single day because of all the people that are driving, like to your point, from Aztec, from Bayfield, from Mancos, from wherever to either go to work or recreate or coming from Texas and Arizona and New Mexico to recreate in Durango. So when you look at that, I mean, that kind of blew my mind because we always think, oh, Durango's 17,000 people. You don't really think about what that kind of balloons to and breathe. That, you know, it's an organism that breathes and exhales. You know, and so it was really interesting to hear that. You know, so whenever you're looking at that statistic, you know, you got to think about the city services, whether it's transportation, police, fire, recycling, trash, water.
sidewalks.
Yeah.
You know, nobody ever wants to hear that, but it's like, it's important, you know? It's like, it really is. It's the little bitty stuff. So I think the county's nearing like close to 60,000. I think we're almost at 58,000.
Yep.
So that's crazy. I mean, so we go from 17 during the day to, you know, 35,000, you know, during working hours. That's wild.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think, I would say if you could do anything about parking tickets, that would really help me.
Noted.
Every time I go to the Wells Group Durango office, I get a parking ticket. And the guy's really nice about it. You know, he's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm like, well, you could just not ride it. You know,
We'll just dissolve the parking, the parking meters.
You know, and I do, the funny thing is I have a parking pass in my wallet. I just need to go to their office and put $200 on it and I'm good for it. You know, but I'm lazy.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I'll just, you know, and they make it so easy because it's the, you know, the debit card anymore.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like 3-hour parking. It's like, man, every time. So,
that was one of the things that, you know, part of the benefits of working at El Moro is that they gave up managers a parking pass to park in the transit lot. And so, man, I don't mind walking the block and a half to work, you know, but that went away. And so now I'm like, oh God, I gotta go like buy quarters from the flipping, you know, store.
Oh, so when is the election day? April 4th?
Yep.
Okay.
4-4.
Nice. And so you're hot to trot on the campaign trail right now?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get the last of my signatures to turn in. You have to have, you know, 25 signatories for your petition to run for council. So I'm working on the finish part of that. Still trying to do some campaign fundraising to be able to get signs. I was kind of talking to my campaign coordinator and I was like, man, I could really buy these signs, you know, for a lot cheaper if I go online. It's about $1,000 to buy 200, you know, yard signs. And she was like, I really think you should keep it local, you know, from, you know, a transparency standpoint, you're supporting the local economy. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. But it's, you know, more than double that cost. So, but she's absolutely right that it's important that we stay local, contribute to the local economy, you know. And so, you know, it's, you know, this is kind of like a microcosm of the greater scale, but, you know, being accountable to the people that are contributing to my campaign. Well, when you're talking about a $90 million a year budget, you have to be accountable to the people that contribute towards that through sales tax and other revenue mechanisms. So yeah, just learning from a very early on, like you're responsible for other people's money and being accountable and transparent with that.
Yeah, that's the thing that it would scare me away from it. I think is not the transparency. Like I mean, we were talking. I don't care. I'll say whatever I want on this mic. It's going public. People are hearing it eventually. But I think just as far as like the like on your webpage, it's it's you, the wife, and the kids, and it's like you're out there in the public and people know you, and it's a little bit daunting to me because it's it's like they've got a little bit of a view into like almost into your life.
Sure. And it indirectly puts targets on my family's back. And that's something I had to have an honest conversation with my wife about, if I do something that, pisses off a demographic or a section of our population, then you're going to be, you're going to probably have to live with a little bit of that, and my kids too, So that was something that we had to really have an honest conversation about, do we want to expose the family to this if I, make any sort of decision,
Your kids understand what you're doing? I mean, they kind of...
Dad, we get to move into the mayor's mansion, Not quite, buddy. Because they see the governor's mansion. Oh, the governor lives in the governor's mansion. Yeah. Dad, you're going to be a millionaire. No. I'll tell you right now, we're not going to be a millionaire. Awesome. So anyways, it's cool to see what their perspective is on what this all means. But I think they're excited, but I don't think we'll ever really truly know the full scope of it until we're in it.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be, that's just interesting. Like I said, I mean, we started this out just, talking about, I don't know if it's a mental capacity or the mental ability for that to operate in that space. My hat's off to you for wanting to kind of jump in there. I think it's a very, for me, I still believe, at least at the infancy of when somebody gets into the public elected position, it is a very selfless act. I don't know that I could do it. I mean, it's not necessarily that I'm selfish. So again, my hat's off to you for going like, I want to do this. Yeah, it seems interesting. So I do want to ask you one quick thing though.
Sure.
And I hate to go. I know it's probably beating a dead horse, but the COVID situation was I feel like it was more of a propellant for you to kind of, I don't know if this happened to you, but yes, you operated in that service industry and have served me and had multiple conversations. And I don't really even know how we became to kind of like know each other. I think it was a bunch of guys worked at the same restaurants you were managing.
We have a lot of overlap.
I never worked ever with you, but it's like I was either always drinking or eating, and it was always this like mutual friendship. And, so I mean, I've felt that firsthand from you, that serviceability, that approachability, that kind of honesty. Like it's I'm the guy, yes, across this table that's serving you whatever I'm serving you, but it was always very truthful, conversation.
Sure. Honest.
And so yeah, but I feel like maybe that like this role was always kind of like there, from a community standpoint. But like you were saying a second ago, it's like you kind of the people or like end up being like your bubble, right? And you've worked very well to kind of plant seeds and like you've done it long enough at a certain level to where multiple people obviously in the community. But I feel like that COVID element was a huge propellant to kind of get you there. So I just want to talk about it.
Sure.
And this episode's going to be flagged. It's going to say COVID-19 pandemic, beware. They're giving out false information on every platform. But either way, I want to talk about it because it was a huge deal. Obviously it's a big fabric point within our community. So if we look at that, the COVID scenario, when it first hit and it first shut down, did your wife still work in the service industry?
So she at that point was with Republic National Distributing Company. She's the beer and spirits rep for mostly the on-premise. And so she was, not directly affected by the closure in terms of like working for those individual units, but she was very directly impacted because all of those on-premise restaurants and bars and off-premise was still okay, which is liquor stores. But 94% of her portfolio is on premise restaurants. And so when the restaurants were shut down, so was her business, but through beer
so
and
that affects both of you guys.
Sure.
It shuts down. And like we said, we had no knowledge of how this thing was really being spread or, what information was coming out, whether we could trust it. I mean, I think we were just all so freaked out.
Sure.
We were just like scared, like,
More
we are
unknowns
going
than
to
knowns.
die, right?
Yeah.
Was the message. And so you guys are shut down. Obviously, I imagine, like most of us, we have some savings. Some of us had no savings.
Sure.
And you're financially impacted. You're at home. Your entire world is turned upside down, basically.
Sure.
So I'm curious as to whether people reached out to you and like, Dave, what can we do as far as, like you being kind of that local avid, like, were people here locally going, hey, Dave, we need some help. Do you have ideas? Or was it you being in that scenario where your life is literally turned on its ear and you going, I've got to do something. I've got to figure this out. How do we get back to this? And then you building and that starting sort of propagated, beyond that.
So I think, the first part of that is, people, they didn't know. So everybody's just kind of like, what the, what's going on, and so to kind of give, a little bit of perspective. So basically early on in the pandemic, so we had multiple business stakeholders across the region kind of all get together, and we call it the La Plata County Economic Recovery Task Force. So mouthful, but it was, San Juan Basin Public Health was there so they can help, guide us like, hey, this is what we know now. This is how we're going to, influence your conversations because of the health data that's out there. But it was the Chamber of Commerce from Ignacio, from Bayfield, from Durango, Louis Marchino. That's the name of the Region 9. Okay. Laura Louis Marchino. We were talking about that earlier. Anyways, so having her be a part of that conversation, Southwest Small Business Development was a part of those conversations. I mean, we probably had sector-wide, the hospital, Centura Health CEO was part of that conversation. CEO of Animas Surgical Hospital, Joe Thine, was a part of that conversation. So we literally had so many stakeholders about what the pandemic was and how it was impacting our businesses, but how do we, intelligently and thoughtfully and compassionately reopen businesses without really adversely impacting the health of our community. And so for me, being the president of the Restaurant Association for the past 8 years, I've become a part of all of these different newsletters and whatever else. And so early on, I was getting all of this information. It was like drinking water from a fire hose. Just everything was being thrown at me from obviously the different funds that were there to help. Businesses came kind of later on, but like, basically people were like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, I don't know either, but I was getting all this information. So early on in the pandemic, I couldn't sleep or whatever. So I just started taking all this information, distilling it down, taking like the key points. Here's the websites, especially when we went to the health department was saying, hey, we're in level green, we're in level blue, we're in level, red, yellow, and orange, and all that sort of thing. So providing them links and the data, and this is what happened today. Here is what the new public health order, the PHO that just came out, that the governor signed off yesterday. Here it's on page 67. This is how it affects restaurants. This is how it affects hotels. And so because people didn't necessarily say, I need help, they were just like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What can we do? What can we not do? And so I guess early on in the pandemic and then, kind of subsequently further down, but I just compiled data. Again, I just tried to distill down like what was relevant, what was important. And then just even ideas of what other restaurant communities were doing up in New York. New York had some of the most restrictive, COVID policies. Yeah. So what were some of their ghost kitchens doing? You know, what were they doing to try to drive revenues but also keep the community healthy? So really the entirety of the pandemic, I was just trying to give out information because we just didn't know, you know? And so, that was my main focus, was to try to just give them information, you know, whatever decision you decided to make. I wanted to be a platform that they could be able to get that information. And so another aspect of that is people were in rocks in a hard place. I mean, you look at, you know, CJ's, you know, I don't fault him for making the decision that he did to remain open. I mean, his employees had, you know, bills to pay, kids to feed, and that sort of thing. And so did he. I don't fault anybody for making basically a shitty decision. You know, you shut down, you're impacting all of these people's lives. You stay open, you risk the wrath of the government. Mm-hmm. So my kind of the second half of the pandemic, or I guess after the first third of it, I really fought for how do we legally give people the option to open up beyond just like, hey, this is what the PHO says. You can only do this, this, and this. Well, what if we enact these more stringent health measures? Can we open up at this capacity or whatever? Yeah. I mean, I remember talking to our then county commissioner, Julie Westerndorf. I was like, what's going on here? You know, and she was like, you know, you're right. We gotta reopen restaurants. We gotta figure this out. I mean, to go back to our earlier conversation, the tourism economy in Durango, it's 30% of our economy, but 26% of all people employed within La Plata County are tied to the tourism industry. So 1 in 4 people, I mean, that's not insignificant. It's good that we don't have all those eggs in that one singular basket, but it's still a robust part of our local economy. Anyways, so called Julie. She's like, well, hey, you know, Senate Bill 1 is coming up, you know, call and testify in front of the Senate Finance Committee. So I testified in front of the Senate Finance Committee, like, this is great that you're giving these small business grants to all the folks that need them, but we don't need a handout. We just need to operate.
Sure.
Give us the ability to untie our hands and to just operate. We want to keep the community safe, that there has to be a balance. I guess that's one of my primary fixtures of running too, is like, people always want to put you into silos and like it's this binary choice, either for this or against this. Yeah. It doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have this duality decision where you have to make this false choice of like, it has to be this or it has to be that. We can find a common ground between both. Anyways, so I was like, just give us the ability to operate. You know, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z. Just give us the ability to. And so did that. And then Julie was, you know, she was like, well, let's talk to the health department. Maybe there's something that you guys could do. And this was pre 5-star program.
What is the 5-star program? Sorry.
So give me 1 minute and I'll get into that. So that's kind of the leading into that. Gotcha. But basically Julie called a meeting between me, Leanne Jalon, who's the executive director for San Juan Basin Public Health, Brian Devine, who's the deputy director and was responsible for the COVID-19 response for San Juan Basin Public Health, and then Chuck Stevens, our county manager, Julie, and myself. So it's just us 5 in a Zoom meeting. I mean, again, there's a real opportunity for me not being in the elected arena, but I'm influencing policy and having these key stakeholder conversations with people that do have the ability to move the needle. Sure. You know, I mean, holy shit. I'm one of 5 people in this conversation that really has impact for thousands of people. What are we going to do and how are we going to do it? So, you know, and I don't blame Leanne or Brian. I mean, we still have great relationships and maintained a great relationship throughout the entirety of the pandemic. We not have always seen eye to eye, but we both came to a mutual respect for one another and what we were both trying to accomplish. But she's like, the public health order says this, and I am bound by that. I cannot defer from that. And I'm like, you know, I get it. You're right. So that's when, you know, basically the Mesa County, so GJ, Grand Junction, had their 5-star policy program, which is basically kind of what we talked to earlier, in that we are willing to do X, Y, and Z to be more restrictive, but allows us to be open. then we were in the colors of the public health order. You can operate in level orange, you can operate in level yellow, yada, yada, yada. So Mesa County had that, they pioneered that program. And so they were able to do that. And so we kind of, went back to the governor. And so we're, all of these different municipalities across the state went to, basically the health department for the state, CDPHE, and advocated that the governor and CDPHE implement this pioneer program across the state. So basically it became the Plata County 5-star program, but there's a whole application process. You had to, what are these businesses going to be doing? I mean, it took we had a 5-star policy team. So it was myself, it was Tim Walsworth from the Business Improvement District, Michael French from Economic Development Alliance, his number 2 then, Emily Meisner, and then Jack Llewellyn, Chamber of Commerce ED. So it was just us on the policy team. So like we, filled out the application. I mean, it was probably 2 weeks of work to try to get the framework of this program up and running. But we sent it in, and it was, I want to say it was Christmas Eve 2020 that we got the approval from the state government saying that we could institute this program.
Oh, wow.
Well, now the heavy lift truly begins.
Yeah, you know, put it in action.
Yeah.
Right? Wow.
So I had to write, for the restaurants, if you want to be a 5-star approved, restaurant, meaning, if we're in level red, that means everything's shut down, right? Mm-hmm. But if you implement these strategies in level red, you can operate in level orange. So you can have 25% capacity, yada, yada, yada. If we're in level orange, but if you implement these policies, you can now operate in level yellow. So you, by trying to maintain in the community health aspect of things, you could operate in a level higher. And so that was a really big aspect of what we did. And then we talk about the whole bump out program and what was instituted and getting that off the ground. Tim from the bid was a really big aspect of that.
Did you have a lot of buy-in from the restaurant community into this 5-star program?
Yeah, I'd say we did. I mean, we had a pretty healthy, probably 30 or 40 at the very least.
Yeah.
But by the time we instituted this program, things were starting to slowly, progressively open back up. And
because
then
December 2020, it was still hot and heavy, like big time.
Oh, totally. We were shut down. Yeah. Everything was still shut down. I mean, we shut down for the second time.
Okay.
And then we didn't reopen until, mid-January, late January, because of COVID and everything was still shut down.
Yeah.
So I had to write the manual. It was like a 12-page, handbook of what the restaurants need to do. But then I had to we needed some sort of authority or enforcement arm. Mm-hmm. So I had to train all the sheriff's office. I wrote the manual. All right, now I got to train the SO to be able to go and do the inspection, write off, here's your rubric, here's what, you need to check on. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy process of being the authority figure of a 5-star policy team, and one of those key policy members of instituting this program to give us a legal option to operate our business.
Do you think actually, in hindsight, looking at it, do you think that because at that time you weren't an elected official or you weren't running, that you were a private citizen running that you were able to kind of do it better, so to speak, without having to worry about outside influence? I know you're working with these other members that were elected officials, but it's I'm hearing it and I almost feel like they were leaning on you a little bit, A, because you're the subject matter expert, but also for B, it's you kind of had a little bit of freedom to kind of move slightly faster than a normal elected position would be able to, right? Sure.
I think that's a multifaceted answer. Number one, a good leader will always leverage the experts in the room to influence their decision making. And second to that is that I was able to leverage what I've done in the past 8 years as president of the Restaurant Association, being a vocal person to advocate for restaurants. We get into the whole, why did I even become president of the Restaurant Association? But basically I wanted to make sure that we had a voice, especially on the statewide level, everything, as we know in our little pocket of Durango, everything is so, because of the density, everything is so front range, centric.
Sure. Yeah.
We always talk about Colorado. It's the I-70 corridor. And then from, basically Fort Collins to Pueblo is basically what they talk about.
Yeah.
And
that's Colorado. By the way.
But I wanted to make sure that people knew that we existed. And so 8 years ago, I was very vocal about like, hey, we are a part of Colorado and we advocate that this is what we need. This is what our challenges are, being 3.5 hours from the major municipality, having basically 2 ways in and out of Durango. There's a lot of challenges that we face that not many other people realize, because we don't have an interstate, So anyways, being able to, people knew that I wore that hat in all of those different arenas. And so even if you were a public official, you may not have known me, you probably knew of me because of my stance and being able to advocate on such a big part of our local economy, the restaurants. And so anyways, leveraging my expertise in the restaurant arena, leveraging my relationships with everybody and knowing what I can bring to the table. I think that was a big part of being able to be in those conversations. So as part of the Economic Recovery Task Force, I was also the restaurant and retail sector chair, so we would meet as a little subcommittee. And then we also had a city council official as a liaison to that committee. So we would then, it was Melissa Youssef who was as a part of that committee, that subcommittee. So we would have those conversations. This is what we're kind of doing this week. This is, the bump out program. This is, the rewards program, whatever, to try to drive revenues. So then we would have that conversation, and then she would then report back to the city about like, hey, this is what they're talking about. So because of all of those different roles, I kind of, had, I guess, that expertise or whatever that people were looking for. And then they could lean on me because like, oh shit, he's doing this, and this. Mm-hmm. He's, on this, committee, or he's, reporting back to the governor's office or whatever. It gives me a little bit more credibility, instead of just being like some rando saying like, I work at a restaurant and I know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. You kind of had a little bit of past to kind of bring that to the table. So what, we get through that, we get through the pandemic, we get open to some sort of a capacity. The bump outs are kind of approved, which is basically, just for the people listening, restaurants have the opportunity to kind of build like an outdoor seating area.
And a parking space.
Yep. And so that was a huge deal. Oddly enough, came back the second year when we were past COVID. It was just such a hit with everybody. And
year 3, last year was the third year that we could have it. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. So does that go away? Or do you think?
No, because the appetite, no pun intended, for the public was that this was a good thing. Mm-hmm. And, in the pandemic, having outdoor seating where people felt more comfortable. I mean, that's what hospitality is, making people feel welcome and making people feel comfortable, keeping them healthy. Yeah. That's hospitality 101, right? So being able to have that outdoor capacity was necessary part of I think a lot of those downtown businesses' survivability. I had those 4 tables out in front of El Moro, and that was early on in the pandemic, probably almost 60% of my revenue.
Wow.
And I've got 20 tables inside, and 16 seats at the bar. So that kind of gives you an idea of how critical and how crucial that program was just to have restaurants survive. We're not talking about like thriving and making money hand over fist, to survive, break even until we could get past this hurdle and get past the capacity restrictions. Yeah. And I'm not the only one, but I think it's also important to know that, in a lot of those conversations with the city, the county, and the state, when I was advocating for this bump out program, I was like, we can't just make this downtown centric. We can't just like give these downtown businesses a chance to open up a bump out without giving people up Florida another opportunity, or up, the North Main corridor. Yeah. Let's be able to ease off the parking spots that they need, as part of that code, to be able to like, okay, well, we can half their number of parking spaces through the code and kind of freezing that part of the code to be able to allow them to use 25 or 50 or 60% of their parking areas for a glorified bump out if they choose to use it.
Yeah.
So I really wanted people to know that this wasn't just a downtown program. This wasn't just because I had a vested interest in a downtown business. I really wanted to make sure that every restaurant,
everybody had a chance,
had an opportunity to be able to utilize these different opportunities if they had it. So that was a large part of what I try to do is, to your point earlier, that all restaurants had the same opportunity, not just one that benefited mine.
Sure. So, one thing I think we all experienced it and are still experiencing is just in not necessarily the food and beverage or the service industry, but businesses as a whole are suffering still from, workers returning to work. Some of that may be remote working, and that's totally fine. They're still working, but you're officing out of their house. But you see signs in every single door, and it's not just here. I mean, it's rampant across the country, and people just I don't know how they're affording it, or if they changed their lives during the pandemic to allow for it. But people just they're not wanting to go back to work. It's like they got a taste of like free money from the government, and maybe I don't think it was enough to survive on. I mean, maybe for some people, but it's like it's almost like they can't justify going back to doing something or So what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, it's still.
I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't think people aren't wanting to come back to work. I think this is a whole nother podcast in terms of what that conversation means. Sure. But I went to but I went to the economic forecast. Were you up there?
A few weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the most alarming statistic that I heard was that it used to be 2.0 jobs available for one eligible person, but it's down to 1.8. So 1.8 jobs are available for every one person eligible to work. That was alarming to me. And obviously Durango is it's not just endemic to us. This is across all of America. That 1.8 jobs are available. So that just tells me that it's not just us. It's not just remote workers coming in and taking over the housing and coming in and working. That tells me that it's people either retired or they changed sectors, but also this is a whole nother conversation again, but what we don't have in Durango anymore is a robust immigrant population to be able to do a lot of those jobs that, I mean, at Elmore, we were paying, dishwashers $15 to $18 an hour to start. And I couldn't keep that position filled. That position was almost always open. Yeah. We had a few people that stuck around and, that were able to continue working on, but we were always short on dish. And so frankly, white people don't want to be stuck in a dish pit, but the immigrant population, they're used to working hard. They're used to working multiple jobs, sending money back home to their family. That's that could be decent money for some people. So, and again, that's a whole nother conversation regarding, getting, being inviting to the immigrant population and whatever your thoughts are on, people being here legally or not, but basically this is not a welcoming environment for people to come in and work, if they don't have everything absolutely perfect on their paperwork. Sure. So, I mean, there's an opportunity there, right? Let's give people the opportunity to be a part of the workforce. 1.8 jobs available for every one person eligible to work.
Yeah.
We're talking millions of jobs.
Yeah.
Millions of jobs. We have an available workforce. We just fail to see the opportunities that it lies in.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's a whole nother conversation about immigration policy and that sort of thing. But I mean, just from the low hanging fruit of like, talk about, hospitality jobs or front desk jobs or whatever, that all of these, low wage earning jobs, entry level positions, people just, they don't they don't want to work at it, you know, but we have an opportunity to bring in people that do want those jobs. There's a lot of barriers to get to that point.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Dave, man, that's an hour.
Is it really?
Yeah, we did an hour.
Wow.
So, man, I think that was awesome. You know, I enjoyed it. And you know, thank you for coming on so quick.
Sure.
You know, I was excited to see that, and I was like, God, I got to talk to Dave. It's probably been a decade since we spoke, but
Sure.
I'm excited to see what's coming forth, and I'm excited to see how the campaign trail kind of works out for you. And yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to reach out to you directly, I know you've got a website, but so that way it's out there verbally.
Sure.
Why don't you just go ahead and tell people where
Yeah,
if
of
they've got
course.
questions for you, or they want to, you know, get more data, or just kind of,
Sure.
you know, find out who you are a little bit more in depth. You know, where can they find you, and how can
Sure.
they reach out to you?
Campaign website is DaveWoodruff4Durango.com, the number 4. Instagram is at Dave for Durango, the number 4. And then Facebook is at Dave Woodruff for Durango.
Awesome.
So yeah, and then if you ever shoot me an email, you have an idea or whatever, Dave at Dave Woodruff for Durango. There's a common thread.
Yeah, it's all that's good. Well, man, thank you so much. And on a really, really personal level, thank you for just always being the person that you've been to me, and what you did during COVID. Like I said, I don't know if the local community got back to you with praise or with thanks, but I think it might have been a little bit unseen as to how much work you put into it, and the other members of those, you know, little pocket, you know, development teams, if you will.
Sure.
But thank you for what you did, because it got us back to life. It may
Well,
have been baby steps, but it was fucking huge. And
Well,
I'll say that, man.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Well, pleasure is mine. There's been some outreach to people to say thanks, and you know, again, we lose a lot of our viability, you know, and our vibrancy in Durango if we lose a bunch of restaurants. So I didn't want to see that diminish. So pleasure's mine.
I hope you can do the same.
Always,
for the
dude.
community, man.
Yeah, we'll see.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, thank you, Kyle.
Have you ever felt
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.